For me, I see documentation as just a first step. Consistent execution is where process improvement really pays dividends.
The pursuit of excellence is something we're all striving towards.
I want you to focus on what you do best.
You need to have an approval. How many approvals? What are the steps?
It's really about listening.
If it's not documented, it's not done.
Thanks for tuning into In Systems We Trust, the show where we dive into all things systems and processes and hear from the professionals that are using them to change the landscape of their organizations every day. Today I'm talking to Keith Gillette. Keith is the founder and CEO of TaskTrain. As an incessant optimizer, systems savant, and introverted entrepreneur, TaskTrain brings together Keith's passion for pragmatic process management and his alarming affection for alliteration. He lives in Boston, Massachusetts with his wife. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Keith. How's your day going?
Good. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today, Marcus.
Yeah, it's great. I'm glad that you said yes, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about what TaskTrain has to offer. So you're currently the founder and CEO at TaskTrain. What industry, I guess, would you say that you fall into, and what does your organization do exactly?
TaskTrain is a business-to-business software as a service company. I would say our mission is to enable individuals and organizations to achieve excellence by designing and developing and delivering our simple, scalable process management software. So our namesake product, TaskTrain, is a super simple process management application that enables small and medium businesses and work groups to effectively manage the routine work of their everyday operations. What an application like Basecamp or Asana do for project management, that is planning and scaffolding execution of a unique set of tasks that you do once to achieve a particular goal, TaskTrain does that for process management, planning and scaffolding ongoing activities that teams repeatedly perform to carry out everyday business operations.
Awesome. And do you feel like you're drawn into any one particular industry? Are there groups of people that are using TaskTrain right now, or that you would consider to be your ideal clients?
Absolutely. So we're at base, I would say, a horizontal platform. Any organization or team that has ongoing processes that they want to do the same way every time to ensure quality could benefit from a process management platform like TaskTrain. My background, which we might get into, is in IT operations management, and that's one sort of beachhead customer profile, let's say, right? We've got a lot of processes that have a whole bunch of steps. They're complicated. They often require multiple people to do different parts of those procedures. And so that's one customer profile. We've also had a lot of interest from distributed virtual teams, especially marketing teams, actually, who have, say, content producers, maybe some social media specialists, a project manager, and they have a production schedule for their clients for whom they're putting out new content. That content varies, but the procedure they want to follow for each of those clients is the same. And so that's say another example customer profile for us.
Okay, I'd love to know more about your background. I know you started going there, but how long have you been operating TaskTrain? How did you get to this spot where you yourself are in, this world of, SaaS? Can you talk more about that and really what brought you to this space?
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, TaskTrain is actually just getting started in the market. By the time this podcast is published, we'll have released the last feature to complete our public beta phase. We're very much looking forward to getting broader adoption and eagerly anticipating the user feedback to help us guide our next feature builds. Myself, I've been working on TaskTrain for quite a while now. This is my first entrepreneurial adventure. And as a founder-funded startup, we've sacrificed a little speed for control and building the right solution to some high-quality standards, which is what you want in the process management field. So you asked about my professional background and my path here. I mentioned that has been in IT operations management. I started my career as a support technician, then a network and systems administrator, but I quickly moved into IT management and leadership, primarily in education. I've had the honor of being the president of the Illinois Chief Technology Officers professional organization when I lived near Chicago, and I've headed several IT departments as both an organizationally embedded IT director and also as a virtual and fractional interim CIO, and that's what I've done a bit since moving to Boston. I still do that on occasion as sort of a CIO at your service consulting engagement. The impetus for TaskTrain, what got me started on this entrepreneurial path, was actually the experience of leading those IT service departments. In my leadership roles, I would ensure that my teams had standard operating procedures, that we had documentation developed as just part of our project implementation. And my former employees, I think, would tell you that my motto was, if it's not documented, it's not done.
Okay.
But even with hiring competent and caring team and having documentation for standard operating procedures in place, I found that we made mistakes just more than we should have, and on dumb stuff too, things that were really entirely avoidable if we had consistently followed those procedures. One reason is because IT is complicated, and not everything can be automated, not even now in the age of DevOps. So there's still that human factor, and in the rush of trying to serve a user, finish up the setup for someone who needs their laptop right now, we'd forget a step. That would inevitably come back to bite us. So, I forgot to deploy anti-malware after reinstalling the operating system on that laptop. Keylogger got installed. Not good. I mean, just those stupid things that are a small misstep can lead to major consequences later on. So that's sort of the backstory. Even though we tracked our service request in a help desk ticketing system and we had these documented procedures, there's still this gap between that ticketing workflow and those SOPs, and that's the gap that TaskTrain tries to bridge. Just one more thing, the
Sure.
specific crystallizing event, right? So that's the narrative backdrop, but the crystallizing event was listening to the audiobook of the Checklist Manifesto, which I highly recommend to you and your listeners if you haven't read it, by Harvard medical professor and surgeon Atul Gawande.
Okay. I know that book right now is in my Amazon wish list. I just need to click buy now. But yeah, great book from what I've seen and what I've heard from it. Great title. I want to hear more about your role at TaskTrain, because I know, like, you've told us a lot about your history, which is so impressive, how you've come to this place and you're taking this now entrepreneurial journey. And I'm sure you're familiar with Michael Gerber's The E-Myth, right? And so
another inspiration, another book that I commend to everyone as well. So I read that many years ago, and that informed the work that I was doing as an IT director, and really the mindset I had around how to do my job in those roles, and is one of those touch points for me even now.
That's incredible. Yeah, because he talks about this manager and, the technician, and, at some point these people have this struggle where they have this, what he calls entrepreneurial seizure, right? But it doesn't sound like that's what happened with you. I mean, like, you just let us know that you read the book early on and you were inspired from those readings and your other, learnings along the way, the importance of process documentation and starting from scratch, right? And so I'd say for you, it's pretty evident that you did not, suffer one of those seizures, and you are in the place where you need to be. And so, like, what does a typical week look like for you and entail when it comes to the work that you do?
Sure. Well, my title on the TaskTrain Articles of Incorporation is Chief Executive Officer, which sounds impressive, but I tend to refer to myself as the founder and factotum. Factotum being the wearer of many hats and jack of all trades. TaskTrain is a founder-funded company. We have a few equity partners participating in a dynamic equity split and a small development team, but we haven't raised outside investment. So we're a very lean team, and I'm involved in just about everything. As to my typical day or typical week, as a product company, much of my time is taken up with product development. I start my day with our daily application development stand-up meeting via Zoom from my home office here, and that may take me into a deep dive into the code with the developers if they have issues. I'm the product manager. It was my idea, my vision. And I'm also the development manager for the development team. I did the technical architecture, and I'm really the lead programmer. So those are the hats that I'm putting on and taking off in the morning. I may go from writing a user story to describe how a feature is going to work, to decomposing that feature story into development tasks for the other developers, updating our development processes based on feedback from the last feature release, and getting the procedure right for getting the code in for review and submitting pull requests, etc. To actually building the code as well. The 40,000 lines of TaskTrain, I've written a fair number, and I've proofread every single line. So that's typically my morning. But I'm also, of course, responsible for the business side as well. So afternoons may be spent writing a blog post to contribute to content marketing efforts, reviewing next round of social media posts from my social media partner, or developing new copy and design for website updates, and tasking our website developer to implement that. Interspersed, perhaps user support via chat or email as issues and questions come up. And just right now, 2 evenings of my week are taken up with participation in the Venture Cafe launch pre-accelerator program based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, just across the river here. So that gives you a flavor of what I'm doing on a typical day or week.
And I think like the wearer of many hats is a definite understatement. In your case, if there's another analogy that encompasses all that you have under your purview, I think, we're definitely leaning more towards that end of the spectrum. But, you know, obviously, like you've come a long way on your own. You have, you know, more than enough knowledge and experience in this space, and you haven't done it on your own. You're managing a team. You have developers. There's back and forth. There's iterations in your processes. And so I want to know what the evolution of those, you know, company systems and policies have really looked like. Is it you taking your wealth of experience and saying, this is what we're doing, this is how we do things here, follow this? Is it a collaboration of best practices from your dev team that is, you know, displaced around, you know, the globe? And are you coming together on those things? You know, how often are you reviewing them, making improvements? So like, what does it look like? Where's the knowledge coming from, and how are you making those improvements over time?
Sure. Well, I would say I definitely take the lead on that process and procedure development, getting the systems right. But it is a collaborative process. I think that you absolutely have to involve the people who are doing the work in designing the work. They're the ones who have the intimate knowledge of the details that make or break quality execution. So it's got to be a collaborative process, and the more ownership you can give the people who are doing the job of designing the job, the better results you'll have. That said, I found that you have to, as a leader, set the expectation that we are going to have shared and common processes, and we are going to have standards by which the effectiveness of those procedures are judged. And so that's why I take the lead on making sure it's documented and making sure that those procedures are followed, not in a a punitive way or in a controlling way, but just in a pursuit of excellence way.
And so how do you really keep your team online? Because yeah, the pursuit of excellence is something we're all striving towards, but as we know, it's never perfect. You just said that there's feedback that's received, there are iterations of these processes. And what I find, with the more clients we talk to, the more build outs we do at Ditto is, that there's this problem with, work about work. Right. And so you're getting caught in trying to find where the knowledge is. You're trying to find where things go, who is doing what, by when. And generally, there are times where the left hand may not know what the right hand is doing. And so with that term work about work, I want to know, what does that mean for you? What does it look like in your organization? And, what do you do with your team to eliminate all the in-between that can often bog down teams and organizations?
Right. Great. Well, I think there are a couple kinds of work about work. Some of that I would just call administrivia, right? In the quality management world, it might also be known as non-value added activity, right? Your NVA, work that doesn't produce something for your customer, right? As they're the ultimate judge of the worth of the product you produce. And if it's not producing value in what the product or service they're getting, it's just a non-value add. And that's one of the 7 wastes of the quality management discipline of lean thinking. So if that's the type of work about work that you're talking about, then looking to lean methodologies is what I would do, because it really provides the methodology for assessing and minimizing or eliminating that non-value added work. Their classic tool is what? Value stream analysis. And that's a tool that I've used in process consultation work with other organizations. You just map out all of the processes, say in your critical production process, and categorize each step as to whether it's adding value from what the customer is ultimately going to get, or if it's just like for some internal purpose, some compliance regulation or bookkeeping, that sort of thing. And you can get fancy and quantify the effort for each of those steps and the cycle time to get from one to the next to figure out where your big wastes are. But just mapping that out and categorizing them can be hugely eye-opening and helpful in figuring out how to either minimize the time and effort on those steps, or just better yet, eliminate them if you can get rid of them. And for that, especially for just minimizing, if you have to keep those steps in place, automation systems can enormously help. And that sort of automation or systems of coordination can help remove that type of waste and just the back and forth of whose job is it, right? That whose job is it? Where are we in the process? Even if they are value-added steps, just that overhead of communication is something that every team struggles with, and is one of the reasons that I built TaskTrain, because for ongoing procedures that have multiple steps, lots of times it's in the handoffs between those steps that problems can occur. Somebody just drops the ball. They didn't realize that it was their turn to pick something up. The deadline is missed, etc. So, TaskTrain allows you to take your standard operating procedures and integrate them into everyday workflow as actionable assignments. You create a checklist template, put in every step in whatever procedure that you're having to do. So if you're onboarding a new employee, you've got all of those phases mapped out, and at each step you can have a as much documentation or instructional material, the just-in-time training that you need for the people who are going to be carrying out those steps. And then when it comes time to onboard a new employee, you assign that procedure, and each step then can have its own assignee, its own start and due date, and its own comment thread. So that's how we try to address this generic problem of work about work, of just coordinating the handoff between different people in a process by centralizing it all around a shared understanding of the process, which is right there in front of you.
Wow. And how do you, or how does TaskTrain in this case help you prioritize that? So if you're running lean, for example, right, like you're organizing like your backlog or your different variants, and you know there are some issues that you need to address. How do you personally prioritize those things? Do you start on the customer facing side, or is there anything that's mission critical? And like, what does that setup look like to make sure that, you know, within a timely manner you can address those variants and resolve those problems and improve the processes?
Right. So for that, I would go to another quality management methodology, theory of constraints. So you need to look at what the bottlenecks are, what the constraints are on your business. Primarily, you're trying to deliver value according to your organization's mission, and achieve some level of throughput that is sustaining your business and providing what you've promised to your customers. So for TaskTrain, that is putting out the next feature and satisfying a customer support requests, right? So those would be a couple of critical processes that we would look at, and it just depends on what's driving your business, what those important processes are to look at. But it's really the primary production function of your organization. If you're delivering a service, what is that service? What is the process for delivering the service? And if you break that process down from what the customer gets to how you're delivering it, what is it that is the thing that is slowing it down the most? Is it available time for your key employees? Are they wasting too much time on the sort of handoff that we talked about, that work about work? You've got to look at that, and the answer is going to vary, but it's finding that constraint and then figuring out how can we relieve that constraint. If it's a non-value added step in your process that you can eliminate, great. Now you can get faster throughput, deliver more of whatever it is your organization is putting out there in less time.
Okay. And just to circle back on something you said earlier, like, do you have beta testers right now that are providing some of this feedback as well? Or do you have your own internal roadmap of features and you're doing your debugging as you go along just to continue to improve on the platform? What does that look like? How are you getting that feedback?
Sure. So we have had a couple of waves of beta testers. We're in an open beta, but we also had a private beta before that, and that was very valuable in giving us initial direction. So that while the initial vision for the product was driven by scratching my own itch of what I described in managing service departments and wanting to bridge that gap, we've definitely really valued and taken the feedback from the beta testers that we have, and are looking forward to broadening that scope to figure out what it is that would be useful to build next, now that we have this basic workflow that I described in place.
Okay.
And so what does it look like? I'm curious, like, because you manage a remote team, can you just confirm that, like, where is your team right now? Are they all in the US? Are they offshore? Are they overseas?
So yeah, I have a partner in a marketing partner in Canada right now, and we're fully distributed. And then I have a development team and a development partner in Bangalore. So that's where our primary development support is coming from at this point. So we're
Okay.
multiple time zone company, and we have to work with the overlap in times between British Columbia and Bangalore.
Yeah.
Me here in Boston in between.
Yeah, sounds exactly like what we're all doing, right? Just, trying to manage multiple people everywhere and across different time zones. So like my question really is, with a displaced team, right? You have different time zones, you have different things to consider. And now, especially with people not in a maybe office or dedicated working space, they're at home, there are distractions. And so how are you, triaging with your team, setting up projects? I know you said you have your daily stand-ups. And so is your day just pretty much spread out with meetings? And then how are you, handling your planning and resourcing as well with these individuals, and like really rallying around your team? Is the team supporting each other? Are they going to, colleagues to make these things happen? Are you championing that and making sure that it's happening? What does that team dynamic really look like?
Sure. Well, I really believe in, especially for the developers, a lot of maker time, right? Because it takes in development as well as in a lot of creative fields, long blocks of uninterrupted focused time to get quality work done. If you're constantly being interrupted, then your productivity is going to drop. Just the setup time to get back into the flow of either writing code or writing a blog post or designing a graphic, whatever it is, takes a while, and that's a huge drag on productivity. So we try to time block, and for myself, for example, I time block the morning after my stand-up to check in for the most challenging intellectual work of the day, and I try not to schedule meetings during that time. So that may be working on the next feature, whether that's writing the user story for it, doing mock-ups for it, or actually coding it. So I've got a couple-hour block there, shift to something else in the afternoon when I may have a little bit less freshness and energy. We do use some interrupt-driven technologies like Slack, just to do quick check-ins. We're still a small team, so that's not too bad. I'm not a big fan of that myself. I mean, it's great to have the instant connection and just being able to basically virtually knock on somebody's office door as you would have in a traditional co-located work environment. But at the same time, you've got that issue of interruption. So I actually, as one of the policies that we have here, or guidelines for communication, established a matrix of communication priorities. Actually, the matrix is available as a blog entry on our website as well, of what medium to use for what kind of message, right? Do you really need to make this an interrupt-driven Slack message, or is this a general discussion that we can have in either, not a direct message, but a Slack channel, or is it an email? We don't expect the same sort of response time from an email that you would from a Slack message. Or is it a collaborative question that we need to solve in a scheduled meeting where we're having real-time face-to-face, because it's going to take a while to sort out, and there may be some sensitive issues. Is it something that we can develop in a Google Doc together, right? So just a list of considerations and recommended communication channels for that. So that's one thing that has helped our internal communication workflow, is just establishing those shared expectations for different type of communication and providing the right tool for the job. And I've done a lot of work in our core processes, application development in particular, of not only creating the standard operating procedures for doing that, and those were just initially a Google Doc, where I listed out, here's the procedure that we're going to follow. Here's the design phase. Here's the development phase. Here's the review phase, the deployment, etc. Now that TaskTrain is online, those procedures live in TaskTrain because that's what the tool is designed for. But also some custom systems to support that. So we use Airtable, for example, which is sort of a Google Sheet-like relational database that's been very effective for us in keeping our development workflow on track. I had started with a Google Sheet that had about a dozen tabs in it. One tab devoted to a list of features and prioritized, one of them to a release plan that would be related to a group, a feature, or one feature in particular, a list of specific tasks that was related to getting that feature out the door, another to a list of the data models that we needed to create to implement that feature, another of all of the visual components that we needed to create to make the user interface, another for the application programming interface that's used for the client to talk to the server. And that was great, but what Airtable allows you to do is then stitch them all together so that you can just follow the links and see how they're all related and know this task, I'm working on this feature, and this feature is related to this story and this and this component, and it's all together for us so we can be on the same page. And that's really been a great boon to our workflow and coordination and keeping everybody on the same page as well.
You just said so much in there, and it's so much. It was so good. I have questions. So one of them is around like the Airtable G Suite's integration with TaskTrain. But just to go back to Slack for a little bit, do you have kind of onboard, communication channels within TaskTrain? Because like you said earlier, like if it's not in that project management system, like it doesn't exist. And for us, that's Asana. Right. And so, oftentimes we'll be in a Slack channel, and I tell my partner this all the time. It's like Slack is like a black hole for me. If you need me to do anything, or if you don't want me to do something, absolutely put it in Slack, because it will not happen. And we have these conversations with the team where we're back and forth, and we're clearly talking about the project. We're talking about the deliverable. We're talking about the client or the build. And, oftentimes like someone will jump back in and say, great, let's continue this conversation in Asana, and we'll bring it back. Right. And so it's like, I would love to get the link to your blog that you talked about on the different uses for the channels, but that is a common problem. And then you have this issue where, we communicated about this, we talked about this, and then it's, where is it? Right. And then you're searching through Slack, it's not where it's supposed to be. So first question is, does TaskTrain have any onboard communication channels where those things can happen? And then I'm curious to know the second part is, if you're still using Airtable, it sounds like you are, sorry, if you're still using Google Sheets, how does that integrate then with TaskTrain, and how does everyone know where they need to be looking for certain things? Are you providing links and housing them in TaskTrain so that there is that connection? I'd love to know more about that, but first on the comms inside of TaskTrain.
Yes, so comms inside of TaskTrain is an absolute yes. One of the core features that we built out and got early beta tester feedback on was the need for this. It was on the roadmap originally, but we prioritized it because we knew from feedback how important it was to have integrated communication in the tool, so you could talk about the work in the context of doing the work and tracking the work. Mm-hmm. So in TaskTrain, you have a checklist-based procedure that gets turned into an assignment every time you execute that procedure. So you're familiar with Asana. That assignment is basically the same format as your contents, all the tasks in your project, right? So you can have a multi-level outline or hierarchy of tasks. Assignments have the same thing, but they're set in a process format. so they're consistent every time.
Mm.
Each task then in that assignment can have its own comment thread. And we also have an aggregate view so that you don't have to dig down in which subtask was I in where we had that comment thread. You can get a global view of all of the conversations that have happened on an entire workflow, and those in our, it depends on whether you're in the free version or the paid version, but the paid version also allows you to have attachments. So you can upload documents, pictures, if you're executing a task and you need to document something, that's included as well. But just like with Asana, you can have task level comment threads. We allow that in TaskTrain as well. So that's very important.
Okay.
And remind me of the second part of your question.
Yeah, it was really how you integrate Airtable and Google Sheets with TaskTrain. Are you linking to TaskTrain and that's your single source of truth? And how do you make sure that everyone on your team knows where to look when they're looking for that paperwork or that documentation, sorry?
So most typically the linking goes the other way. So with TaskTrain, we do have persistent URLs that you can copy and paste, and so everybody can get on the same assignment, the same step in the assignment very easily, and or the same step in the procedure if you're just wanted to link to the template for your workflow. But at each step in a procedure, you can embed content. That content can be whatever you like. You can just enter rich text as content right in TaskTrain, and that's where it lives. You can link to anything else. So in response to your question, typically if we're referring to an entity or a feature story, we would link out to that or to an external procedure an external policy or reference in Google Drive or in Google Docs. We would have a link to that. You can also upload attachments as well. So if you have a PDF, et cetera, et cetera. But you can go either way with that because we offer deep linking into the application. But typically you're at a step in the process and you need to refer to some external resource to help you get through that, and that's immediately available to you.
Okay.
I want to know, just as we're getting close to the end here, what is one thing that you would want to say to owners of organizations? What are they not considering when it comes to process documentation or improvement?
Sure. I guess the question I would ask is, where's the gap? Where's the gap in your process? Where are you feeling the pain? And that's going to vary, but for me, I see documentation as just a first step. Consistent execution is where process improvement really pays dividends. So you have to, first have that defined procedure that you can execute, track, and measure to improve. So you definitely want to set your standard. I think it was Taiichi Ono, one of the founders of the Toyota production system, major figure in the quality management movement, said that without standards, then there can be no improvement. Definitely set your standard with documenting your process, your standard operating procedure. Work with your employees to do that because they're close to the work. Check them for efficiency when you do that. And then build a culture of actually executing them. You've got to measure the results, both the output results and the outcome metrics, which are going to be separate from that. The customer satisfaction at the end, the revenue, depending on what business you're in, and feed that back in. That's the classic plan, do, check, act quality management cycle.
Right.
And TaskTrain can help you with parts of that, since we provide the platform for documenting those standard operating procedures and bridging that gap so that you can actually integrate them into everyday workflow and ensure they're executed, not just documented, and give you some of those basic accountability and execution metrics to see how you can improve things.
Perfect. And TaskTrain is tasktrain.app. You can check them out online. Keith, where can people check in with you, connect with you, hear what you have going on?
I would say head to tasktrain.app. You can not only sign up for a free account and check out what we've built, but also get in touch with me. You can reach me via the built-in messenger on tasktrain.app, and also find my social media links and contact information on the people page of tasktrain.app.
Perfect.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. I could talk systems all day.
It's been my pleasure. This is fantastic, Marcus. Thank you so much.
Good. I'm so glad. And so if you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, follow, depending on where you're watching or listening to this. If you have a friend or a colleague that you think would benefit from hearing this conversation, then please share it with them so that we can reach more listeners just like you. And just as a recap, all the links from today's talk will be in the show notes. You got tasktrain.app. Keith is going to send me the link to the blog that we referenced as well. I want to thank you so much again, Keith, for being here. And for the viewers, thank you for spending your time with us, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.